Okay, so I've gotten word there's no Q&A tonight, so just enjoy Hanukkah, as they say. What? Let the mirror know, yeah. So anyway, we were in the middle of discussing the machlokas, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the very famous machlokas, whether you go from 8 and you go down, or you go from 1 and you go up. Now remember though, just to restate the obvious, this is a machlokas only on the level of mahadrin min ha-mahadrin, meaning in terms of the basic mitzvah, everybody agrees, all you have to do is light one candle every single night. On the level of mahadrin min ha-mahadrin, we have a machlokas. Is it 8 going down, or is it 1 going up? And of course, in a machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, we paskin like Beis Hillel, and that's why we go up. Now, the Gemara gives 2 reasons, and we had started talking about the first reason. We didn't finish yet. The first reason that the Gemara gives is that Beis Shammai says we light based on the days that are coming towards us. So therefore, on the first day, counting that day, there's 8 days of oil, so to speak. The next day is only 7 days of oil. You're looking at the days that are coming. According to Beis Hillel, you're looking at the days that are passing. Now, l'chaira, as I said, that's not really a reason. That's just stating what they're saying. You know, it's not a tam. So here is what Rav. So I was sharing a vort with you from Rav Zevin Zatzal, Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin. By the way, a work that you might be familiar with, if you've ever seen the 2-volume art scroll work, The Festivals in Halacha. Have you ever seen that? If you haven't, it's worthwhile to get. That is a translation of Rav Zevin's Sefer, Moadim B'Halacha, which is a magnificent, magnificent Sefer in which he goes through every Yom Tov. It's like a yeshivish Sefer, and he gives you not Halacha L'maisa, but the Iker Chakiros, the Iker types of Torah that are contained about every single Yom Tov. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful Sefer. There's a little bit of controversy regarding the Art Scroll translation. I had mentioned that Rav Zevin, on one hand, was close to the Brisker Rav and the Chazon Ish, but he was also a Chabad Chassid who was Mizrahi, who was a Zionist. A very difficult combination to pull off. So in the Moedim B'Halacha, he has like a 2-line reference to the great Simcha of Yom HaAtzmaut, or the great Simcha of Hakamat HaMedina, and the Art Scroll took that out of the translation. So in the English, that reference was expunged, and those who notice it make a very big deal over it, but whatever. It's that's an interesting issue of censorship of the author's own work. But okay, but be it as it may, Rav Zevin has an essay in which he tries to explain the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Now, we normally understand that the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is, Beis Shammai tends to be strict, as we talked about, the shirish of the neshama is rooted in midas hadin, and Beis Hillel tends to be lenient. But that doesn't explain every machlokas. That doesn't explain the Hanukkah machlokas. Whether it's 8 going down to 1 or 1 going up to 8 is not chumra kula. That's the same number of candles. It also doesn't explain a machlokas, such as we have in the 8th parak of brachos. If when you make kiddush, you first make the bracha on the wine and then kiddush, which is what Beis Hillel says, or you make the bracha on the Yom, Shabbos, and then Yain, which is Beis Shammai says, once again, that is not connected to Chumra or Kula. So Rav Zevin tries to formulate a broader generalization to understand Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel that will even encompass those machloksim. And that is, the idea is that Beis Shammai follows the way Hashem wanted to create the world, and Beis Hillel follows the imperfect world that resulted. Now remember, Hashem originally wanted to create the world with midas hadin. He saw that the world is not going to be niskayim with midas hadin, so he combined midas hadin with midas harachamim, and therefore the ideal world of God is a world of din. The imperfect world, because of the weakness of our bechira, is rachamim and din. Beis Shammai is rooted in the higher reality of Hashem's ideal. Beis Hillel is rooted in the imperfection of the world as it actually materialized. Now that does explain Chumra and Kula, and it also explains the Arizal, that Limos HaMashiach, the halacha is going to be like Beit Shammai because the world itself reaches a higher level. But Rav Zevin says it also explains the 2 other machloksim of Ner Hanukkah and Shabbos. And that is the following idea. If Beis Shammai is looking at the way things should have been, he's looking at potentiality rather than realization, then that would explain, for the Ner Hanukkah, he's looking at the miracle of the oil in terms of the potentiality in the oil. So day one, the potentiality of the oil was 8 days. We didn't know that yet, but Hashem put into that oil a koach to burn 8 days. In terms of the koach means potential, the potential goes down. Day one, Hashem put 8 days in that oil. By day 2, there's only 7 days in that oil. By day 8, there's only 1 day in that oil. So if Beis Shammai is looking at potentiality rather than actualization, that is why he will look at the koach of the shemen rather than the poal of the shemen. Poal is the actualization. Masha'en Kein Beis Hillel, who looks at actualization, he will look at the Hanukkah miracle too in terms of actualization. In terms of actualization, on day 1 I perceived 1 day. On day 2 I perceived 2 days. On day 8 I perceived 8 days. You see? So Rav Zevin's chiddush, so to speak, is that once you move away from chumrah and kula terminology, and you embrace koach versus poal terminology, that's a broader category that will bring in Hanukkah into that machlokas. You see, it's a higher level of abstraction. Instead of just saying chumrah kula, we look at the ideal, the koach, the potentiality, versus the actualization, and that will be able to assimilate the Hanukkah machlokas into that paradigm. Now, what about the Shabbos machlokas, right? Shabbos, we have a machlokas, right? According to Beit Shammai, and we don't do this obviously, you first make the bracha of Mekadesh HaShabbos, and only afterwards do you make Borei Pri Hagafen. This is Beit Shammai. Beis Hillel says no. First you got to make the Borei Pri Hagafen, and then you make the Mekadesh HaShabbos. Now, once again, that has nothing to do with Chumrah and Kula, because they're both saying the same 2 brachos. It's just a question of order. How do you assimilate this into the generalization of potentiality versus actualization? So here Rav Zevin says, fascinatingly, that it all depends on what is our relationship between Gashmias, physicality, and Ruchnias, spirituality. Everyone knows that Shabbos is a day in which both of those aspects of human existence come together. Shabbos is a Ruchnius day, a day of spirituality, a day of Kedusha, a day of a Neshama Yisera. Shabbos is also a day where we eat better food than we normally eat the rest of the week, right? Nice clothing, wine, right, wine. So in a way, how do you integrate it? That's kind of difficult. Yom Kippur, you might say, is an easier type of day. I mean, physically it might be hard to fast. Yom Kippur is a day that's totally Ruchnius, right? There's no Gashmias on Yom Kippur. Okay, so it's Ruchnius. I pull myself away from the physical world, and I concentrate on my relationship with God. But what's this thing about Shabbos? I concentrate on my relationship with God, but then I eat and I drink and I have cholent and wine and all of these things. What is the kesher? What is the connection between body and spirit? What is the connection between Gashmias and Ruchnius? What is the connection between physical pleasure and spiritual joy? So once again, the idealist and the pragmatist will look at it in 2 opposite ways. The idealist says, the way things should be, potential, the way things should be is, I am so overjoyed with feeling the closeness to Hashem. I am so overwhelmed with simcha because of my ruchnius that I want to celebrate even in a physical way, meaning I'm having the cholent because of the ruchnius. It's the ruchnius that induces me to celebrate the gashmias. In other words, the gashmias flows from the intensity of the spiritual pleasure. That is what Beit Shammai says. I make the bracha over Shabbos. And from my joy over Shabbos, I come to the wine. I'm drinking wine to celebrate the holiness of Shabbos. And that's why Beis Shammai says you first make the bracha on Shabbos, and from the Shabbos you come to the wine, or the cholent, or whatever it would be. Beis Hillel is the pragmatist who deals with human imperfection. And for most of us, it's not the joy of Shabbos that brings us to the wine. It's the joy of wine that lets us feel the Shabbos. Meaning, it's not that the Gashmias is a consequence of our spiritual ecstasy, but the Gashmias helps to bring us to an enhanced spiritual state. And therefore, Beis Hillel says, instead of blessing the Shabbos and then blessing the wine, you bless the wine, which will bring you to the appreciation of Shabbos. So again, Rav Zevin wants to say that the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is that Beis Shammai is looking at the world the way it should be, and Beis Hillel is looking at the world the way it is. The way the world should be. The ruchnius should be so intense that I want my body to celebrate as well. The way the world actually is, I got to get my body excited, so hopefully my neshama will come along. I need the gashmias to bring me to an appreciation of ruchnius. So again, what Rav Zevin is doing here is, Rav Zevin is taking the familiar chumrah and kula explanation of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel and developing it at a higher level of abstraction, which can encompass these other machloksim, such as Ner Chanukah, Koach and Poel, and even the Seder of Kiddush, whether it's Yayin and then Kiddush, or Kiddush and then Yayin. Yeah.
So the Beis Hillel makes sense there. It's like I'm trying to make my body evoke the kind of joy I want to feel at Shabbos.
Right.
But if you're so overwhelmed by the ruchnius of it, it's not so clear to me why you should care what the body feels. That position feels a little stranger to me.
Oh, in Beis Shammai?
Yeah.
So the answer would be that that's really the goal, because why did God put us in a body? Meaning, if the only thing that's important is what our soul feels, let our soul be in Shemayim and feel it. The answer is, no, I put your soul in a body so that the body itself can get trained and be elevated in a spiritual way. So the goal is to take the ruchnius and transform your gashmius in that way. Okay, so all of this is the
So in Sukkah, one of the halachas is not like Beis Hillel. We go like Beis Shammai when it comes to placing the table outside of the Sukkah. Do we paskin like Beis Shammai because we feel like Beis Hillel went too far?
I mean, if your Rosh of Aruba, meaning most of your body's in the Sukkah and your Shulchan is outside of the house. Again, I'm not sure if this explanation fully fits that. Part of it is, though, that the Shulchan does represent the material world. And once again, Beis Shammai is saying you got to bring the material world into your Sukkah. We paskin that way. Maybe Beis Hillel is going the other way here. Beis Hillel is actually saying that the Sukkah is like Olam Haba, and therefore the Gashmias doesn't come in. And in that sense, Beis Hillel is rejected. We don't follow Beis Hillel in that way. But that's a good point. I'm not sure if this adequately explains that difference. Now, all of this is reason number one that the Gemara gives in the Machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. But then the Gemara gives another reason for the Machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And here's what it says. This is reason number two why Beis Shammai says you go from 8 to 1, and Beis Hillel says you go from 1 to 8. Beis Shammai says you go from 8 to 1 because that is the pattern of the Parei HaChag, that is the pattern of the bulls that were brought during Sukkot. During Sukkot, when there was a Beis HaMikdash, the Musaf offering were bulls, and they were brought in descending order, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. So Beis Shammai says, the same way the Parei HaChag go in descending order, the Neiros Chanukah should go in descending order based on Parei HaChag. That's the second reason the Gemara gives for Beis Shammai. And Beis Hillel says, no, we have another principle, Malin Bakodesh. In holiness, we want to go up in holiness. V'lo moridin, we do not go down. Well, Beis Hillel's reason seems relatively straightforward. We want to go up in holiness. But what on earth is Beis Shammai saying that the Neiros of Hanukkah should follow the trajectory of the Korbanos of Sukkot? What's the shaychus? Now, I had mentioned a few days ago that perhaps, historically, this is an allusion to the passage in Sefer HaMaccabim Beis, Maccabees 2, where you'll recall that the 8 days of Hanukkah were enacted to be a replacement for Sukkot. And they even took lulav and esrog and sat in the sukkah. And although Chazal did not consider that halachic, but maybe there's a shtickle remez in Beit Shammai's Hanhoga that the candle lighting ceremony corresponds to the Korbanos of Sukkot. It's kind of a zecher to an extinct minhag. The minhag of doing Sukkot things on Hanukkah is extinct. And it was already extinct in the time of the Mishnah. It was a folk tradition. It was not anything that the Chachamim legitimated. And yet, even extinct minhagim sometimes survive in unusual ways. And one might argue that, at least in Beit Shammai, this minhag had a certain survival. So that's one pshat. Right? That's the pshat that I gave you the other day. But today I want to share with you a machshava from the Sfas Emes. In other words, the question becomes, what is Beis Shammai's comparison between the Sukkos Parim and the Neiros of Hanukkah? Why should the Neiros of Hanukkah follow the Parim of Sukkos? So to understand this, we have to look at the Parim of Sukkos themselves. The Gemara already made the observation, the Gemara in Sukkot, many of you learned, that the total number of Parim that were brought on Sukkos are 70, 13, 12, 70 Parim, and they represent the 70 nations of the world that tried to destroy the Jewish people in one way or the other, either by assimilation or by persecution, many different ways. And even though the United Nations does have more than 70 member countries, but that's not relevant because according to the Torah, there are 70 basic nationalities, and then they get divided or subdivided in various ways, right? So, political subdivisions are actually very, very arbitrary. And in fact, that's a very fertile source for civil wars, when they simply lump together, different bits and pieces of different groups and put them together. So, the 70 Parim of Sukkos are keneged the 70 nations of the world. Why do they go down in order? Because Sukkos is a Zman that's very much connected to the wars of Gog and Magog. In fact, some people say the fact that the Hamas massacre really occurred at the end of Sukkot, Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres, may connect it to Gog and Magog, which is supposed to occur around Sukkot, the final downfall of the enemies. And the notion that as we approach Mashiach, the powers of evil will be diminished and weakened as we approach Geula. Now you may say, well, how can I talk about the powers of evil being diminished? We seem to see a resurgence of these powers. But no, the resurgence is like the final death throes, just like a candle blazes up right before it goes out. So yes, it is true that before the death of this evil will be this last resurgence of, unfortunately, destructive, negative energies that are Chavlei Mashiach, the birth pains of Mashiach, the wars of Gog and Magog, the ascendancy of Malchus Yishmael. These are not necessarily the same phenomenon, but all these things are happening. The birth pains of Mashiach, the wars of Gog and Magog, Malchus Yishmael, everything comes together. So the 70 Korbanos of Sukkot going down represents the gradual dismantlement of the powers of evil as we approach redemption. Okay, that is what the 70 Purim represent. So says the Sfas Emes, the same way that the Purim of Sukkot represents the destruction of externalized evil, the 70 nations externalized evil, the Neiros of Hanukkah represents the destruction of internalized evil. Because the Neiros of Hanukkah correspond to our neshamas. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam means what? The soul of a person is a candle that is lit by God. This is the source of a Yortzeit candle, the Yizkor candle. A human soul is compared to a candle that is lit by God. So when you look at the burning candles, this is all the Sfas Emes, you are looking at your neshama. You're seeing a mirror of the radiance of your neshama. So Beit Shammai says, the same way the Purim of Sukkot go down because they represent the gradual diminution of the kochos of Ra in the world, the Hanukkah candles go down because as I gaze at my neshama and I try to be mesakin my neshama, Eish is that which is soreif. Soreif, it burns. Mechala, it destroys. I look at this as a challenge to eradicate and burn away my bad midos, my egotism, my selfishness. Now, if you look at Eish as a metaphor for burning and destruction, then the hope would be it would go down. I start off with 8 things I got to correct. Then I go down to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, what? In other words, sorei for machala, the Ra that is within us. Beit Shammai says, look at that Ra, identify it, burn it away. I don't mean by actual fire, it's a symbol. Burn it away by Musar, by Torah, by Teshuvah. Burn it away. And it's like Parei Achag. Parei Achag is the gradual destruction of externalized evil. The Neiros of Hanukkah is the gradual destruction of internalized evil. Burn it away. And hopefully you'll have less and less to work on as your life progresses. And that is Beit Shammai's connection of Neiros Hanukkah to Parei Hachag. Yeah.
What's the significance of 36 candles? Just as there are 70 bowls, and that's connected to the nations. 36.
Yes, so this is interesting. So this would have to bring in a counter thought. And that is, there is a thought in Sifrei Chasidus, I may have mentioned this, I don't remember, that for the first 3 days of creation, there was no sun until the 4th day. And yet, there were 12 hours of light on day 1, day 2, and day 3. 12 hours of light followed by darkness. Now, those 12 hours of light, there was no sun. So what was the light for the first 36 hours of light, the first 3 days? It was the light of the Shekhinah. And on day 4, the light of the Shekhinah was withdrawn and it was hidden. And that is called the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light that Hashem saves for the tzaddikim in Olam Haba. But it is brought down in Sifrei Chasidus and Kabbalah that the 36 Neiros of Hanukkah bring into the world the 36 hours of hidden light. And that is why there's such an inyan to sit by the lights, to look at the lights, because basically you're really connecting to the Shekhinah. Now it could be like this. Now this is a different image, because I gave you the image of the candles as my neshama. But it's all connected. Because the Gemara says in Sukkot again, Yitzro shaladim misgaber alav b'chol yom. A person's Yetzer Hara gets stronger and stronger and stronger every day. V'yolmolei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ozra. Without God's divine assistance, lo yachalai, I'm going to lose it. So it could be, to answer your question, side by side with the avodah of destroying my internalized evil, I have to recognize that it's only the siyata deshmaya of the 36 hours, or the 36 candles, that represent the light of the Shekhinah that gives me that power. This is not a battle I could win by myself. In fact, this is the hardest battle of life. It's a davar pashut. Pirkei Avos says, Ezeyu Gibor, who is a mighty person of valor. It is not the military hero or the athlete or whatever it would be. Hakovesh es Yitzra, one who can control his Yetzer Hara. And indeed, the Chavis Halavavos brings a mashal that a general had come back from a very successful war. And there was a parade. People were parading, glorifying him. And a Chacham went over to him and said, welcome back from the small war. And now you have to fight the big war. The small war is the war I wage against all of these countries. The big war is the war that I have to wage within myself. So that's why you have to have a shutfus, you have to have a partnership between looking at my neshama, burning it away, but the light of the Shekhinah gives me that strength. Yeah.
The 36 is nice when we get to Hillel, who says that it's increasing, right? That it's to say that the 36, the original light is being restored. But if we're saying now that we're in Beis Shammai that we're going down, the 36 would have to be something that's diminishing, and so something that would be bad, equivalent to 36.
So the truth is, these connect to all sorts of complicated ideas, and that is, it reminds me, again, I'm digressing, but maybe it's good to digress a little bit. Rav Nachman of Breslov raises an interesting question. Actually, the Baal Shem Tov raises the question. That was Rav Nachman's great-grandfather. How come when you first become frum, you become a Ba'al Teshuvah, mitzvahs are so geschmack, mitzvahs are so exciting. I love davening, I love Shabbos, I love kosher. And then, the longer you get habituated, thank you, sometimes you lose the passion. Like, these are a whole bunch of jokes in this genre. How do you know when a Ba'al Teshuvah has become integrated into the frum community, right? That's the goal. The goal is, I want to become integrated, right? I want to be like everybody else. So how do you know? So the whole genre of joke that says, oh, when you bench in 2 minutes, when you don't have kavanah in davening, then you've made it. You become normal. Until then, what's that guy? He's crying during Shemona Esrei. What type of nut is that, right? Now, these jokes have a certain bitter ring of truth. They have a bitter ring of truth. They're a joke, and they're a sad joke a little bit, because when I came to Yiddishkeit, I said I felt such a connection to Hashem. And then, it just becomes part of my sociology. It's just part of my community. So the Baal Shem Tov asked the kasha. Now, what are you going to answer? Well, like anything else, once you become habituated, you get less excited, right? That would be the answer. But with mitzvahs, that doesn't make sense. Because if mitzvahs and Torah learning build your connection with God, how could there be diminishing returns? I'm less close to God the more mitzvahs I do? That doesn't make any sense at all. So the Baal Shem Tov was explaining, how do you understand the idea of feeling less connected to Hashem the more I live a religious life? Now again, I'm not saying this is a universal phenomenon. I'm not suggesting, if any of you don't have that problem, then don't worry about it. Baruch Hashem. But for many people, that's an issue that they grapple with. They had a greater spiritual passion when they were starting off. So the Baal Shem Tov gives a beautiful mashal. He says, imagine a baby who finally decides to walk. So the baby gets up. And initially, the parents are holding the baby by the shoulders. So the baby walks and walks and walks. And the baby's thinking, pretty good, and I'm standing on my 2 legs. At some point, the parents let go. And what's going to happen immediately after the parents let go is plop, plop, plop. The kid's going to fall down. Now, amazingly enough, this is another schmooze. No matter how many times that kid falls down, he's going to get up again. And that's amazing. The Breitowitz used to say, you got to learn from a child learning to walk. There is nothing that will stop that kid from getting up again. No matter how many times they fall, there is something Hashem built into the panemius of a human being, never to give up. If we give up, that is a learned behavior. That is not a natural behavior. The teva of a person is not to give up. It's remarkable. But that's a shmooze for another time. But in terms of the baby falling, if the baby could verbalize his or her thoughts, the baby might wonder, why was it so easy to walk 5 minutes ago? And why is it so hard now? Right? The answer is, it was easy 5 minutes ago because Abba and Ima were holding on to you. But now you're ready for the next step. Now you have to go to a new step. You have to internalize what you were shown and make it your own. Says the Baal Shem Tov, this is kind of what it means to be a Ba'al Teshuvah. When a person is very, very, very far from God, God carries them. God lifts them up. And when God lifts them up, everything is so easy, relatively speaking. Everything is so vivid, everything is so exciting. Benching is so great, and brachos are so great. But then Hashem says, at some point, I've shown you what you're able to become. I'm now going to let go a little bit. I'll still be here to pick you up. I'm going to let go so you make it on your own. So that actually explains very nicely why it goes down. Hashem lets go. But again, like Abba Ve'ima, Hashem is there. But he lets go a little bit. You know? So actually your question actually fits in with this idea that Sorei Famachala Pariachag, it deals with the eradication of the evil within. So, now you understand Beis Shammai, who connects the Neiros of Hanukkah with the bulls, the Parim of Sukkot. What's Beis Hillel's argument of going up in holiness? Here is Beis Hillel's argument. Beis Hillel's argument is that to try to work on myself by confronting my negativities is a beautiful thing. I burn away all of those negativities. But for many people, it's counterproductive. Because when I confront my faults, I confront my mistakes, I confront my inadequacies, instead of having the courage to eradicate them and work on them, I often get overwhelmed. I often get distraught. I often get depressed. I get myself into a morass that I'm not able to pull myself out of. Therefore, Beis Hillel says, the best way to combat the darkness of the soul is not necessarily by confronting the darkness, but by generating light. So instead of looking at the fire as that which destroys, right, Beis Shammai is looking at the Eish as that which destroys. Beis Hillel is looking at the Eish as that which illuminates and provides warmth, and that is, connect yourself to good things. Play to your strengths, meaning even a person who's filled with faults has some areas in life in which they are good, in which they do serve Hashem properly. Beis Hillel says, work on the positive areas that you have, and the darkness will kind of take care of itself. Because to directly work on darkness can often be counterproductive and destructive. So this is, as Sfas Emes writes, David HaMelech says there are two ways of doing tshuva. There is what is called sur meira, turn away from evil. And there's another derech of tshuva called aseh tov, doing good. Beis Shammai's mahalech is sur meira. Beis Hillel's mahalech is aseh tov. Now, you can actually say Now, this is absolutely an oversimplification, as these things generally are, so I'm not saying this as a rigid definition. But on some level, this might be the difference between Chassidus and Musar. Musar is hypersensitive to examining everything within my personality that might be negative. It relentlessly probes and analyzes and introspects to uproot your gaiva, your egotism, your selfishness. It is based on examining every aspect of my personality. Chassidus, again, this is a generalization, says, do good. Do the good things that you do. So instead of a Baal Musar after he davens mincha might think to himself, did I have the right kavanah? What brachos did I miss? What didn't I think about? Was I davening to impress the guy next to me? The chassid will say, Baruch Hashem, I daven mincha. Great. By the way, the Chazon Ish, who was not a chassid, actually felt that that was the better attitude. The Chazon Ish was officially an opponent of the Musar movement. Now, he had great kavod for the Gedolei HaMusar. In fact, he once said, I'm against the Musar movement, but I'm against the opponents of the Musar movement even more. Meaning, he considered the Gedolei HaMusar to be tremendous Gedolim and Kedoshim. But he was against the Musar movement, and it's complicated always, but one of the reasons he was against it is that he thought the hypersensitivity to any possibility of wrong that is so characteristic of intense Musar sometimes made people insecure, obsessive compulsive, and took away their joy in Avodas Hashem. The Chazon Ish says sometimes it's better not to think so much. I mean, think in Torah, but not to think about yourself so much. Think about yourself, you'll always find something wrong. Again, I'm not here to paskin, obviously, yeshivas learn Musar, and everything has its place, and in any case, it's an oversimplification to say Musar only focuses on negatives. That's absolutely not true either, but as a very broad general statement. Musar might represent the Sur Meirah, and Chassidus may represent the Aseh Tov. Of course, the Sfas Emes is kind of a built-in bias. He is a chassid explaining this. So according to the Sfas Emes, it's Beis Hillel, that's the Aseh Tov, that is the derech of Chassidus. So it's almost as if Beit Shammai is the Baal Musar, Beis Hillel is the chassid, and the halach is like Beis Hillel. But even the Chazon Ish said there was a makam for that as well. So that's the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, whether you look at fire as that which burns away the negatives, making it comparable to Sukkot, the Parm of Sukkot, or the fire creates light and warmth in which you build your identity by focusing on your positives rather than your negatives. I mentioned many times before that Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das, who we're zocheh to have come to our Sameach every summer, he once made a statement that Rav Pam, his Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Pam, forbade him from learning Mesilas Yesharim. Now, Mesilas Yesharim is the greatest of the Sifrei Musar. How can you tell a person, don't read Mesilas Yesharim? And the answer is because he took it so seriously that it made him depressed, meaning most people read books of Musar and they don't really impact on that. So I'll read Mesilas Yesharim, I'll read Reishis Chacham, I'll read everything, it's fine. I'll learn it and it won't change me and everything is great. The problem is, if it changes you, it may be too strong a medicine. It may be too powerful. And he felt that, at least at that point in his life, I'm sure Rav Reisman learned Mesilas Yesharim many times since then, but at least at that point in his life, or adolescence, it was thought he needed more of a simcha, more of a positivity in Avodas Hashem. Rav Nachman of Breslov, in addition to his teachings, Likutei Maran, would teach with maisim. He would tell stories. And he wouldn't give the meaning of the stories. You'd have to figure it out. But one of his famous stories is the prince who thought he was a turkey. And that was a prince who was crazy, and he thought he was a turkey. So he took off all of his clothes, and he ate table scraps under the table. And nobody could cure him of his delusion. So a Chacham said, I will cure the prince. So the first thing the Chacham did was he took off his clothes, he started crawling under the table and eating from the floor. So the prince, who apparently could still talk, I'm not sure why, he said, what are you doing? He says, I'm a turkey too. Are you the only turkey? So they're living together as turkeys under the table. After a few weeks, the Chacham puts on his pair of pants and a shirt. And the prince says, what are you doing? He says, who says turkeys can't wear pants and shirt? So the prince puts on a pants and a shirt. Again, it's a long story. It keeps on going. Eventually, at the end of a few months, the prince was walking and talking and eating and sitting and dressing. He was doing everything a human being does.
But he was still a turkey.
He still thought he was a turkey. So we asked the question, was he cured? Well, it depends what you ask. If you asked a psychoanalyst, is he cured? No, he's not cured. He's living under an insane psychotic delusion. But if you asked a behaviorist, he says, what's the difference who he thinks he is? He's doing everything a human being does. Lamai nafkamina. This is Rav Nachman's story. Now Rav Nachman never tells you the meaning of the story. You have to debate it, think about it. But I think the meaning is fairly clear. And that is, Rav Nachman is saying, don't let your self-image define what you can do with your life. We look at ourselves a certain way. We have a certain picture of ourselves, often a negative picture. Maybe that negative picture goes back to childhood or later, whatever it is. And because of that negative picture, I can't, go to yeshiva because I'm a certain type of person. I can't welcome people b'sever panim yafas because I'm a certain type of person. We have that mental inhibition. And until I get over that inhibition, that mental image of myself, I can't move forward. The lesson of the turkey is, even turkeys can get dressed and sit on the table. Meaning, instead of working on your image, your self-image, which you may never be able to do good. And the darkness takes care of itself. And therefore, Rav Nachman, I think, is saying the same thought as the Sfas Emes, not to focus so much on my negativity and shortcomings, but to simply generate the light that I can generate. So B'ezras Hashem, Hanukkah, the rest of Hanukkah should be a time of great, great light for us to be zeicha to the Geula. Yeah.
Do you think people who learn Musa and are always trying to get this negative view on themselves, is it that perhaps maybe they're just learning Musa incorrectly?
I think that's so. In fact, Rav Wolbe has a long arichos that he wants to combat the stereotype that people think Musar is about sadness and it's about depression and it's about negativity. He says true Musar should also bring a person great joy and striving in their avodas Hashem. So if it's always making them sad, then it's not right for them. And that's why, as I say, that's why Rav Pam told Rabbi Reisman, B'dafka, not to learn it because it was having that negative effect. Okay, be well.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome Eich production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.